The galaxy's most brilliant minds whispered his name with reverence, but Professor Caerval felt no triumph as he read the assignment. His slender digits trembled, not with fear but indignation. Study human children? He let out a low chitter, the Tgath equivalent of a scoff, and slammed the datapad onto his desk. Surely this was some cosmic jest. He glanced around his opulent office aboard the luminal nexus, its crystalline walls refracting the starlight into iridescent rainbows. This was a place of discovery, a sanctum of unparalleled intellect, not a daycare. What an insult, Caerval muttered, pacing the length of the room. The council tasks me, with observing Earthlings as if they are anything more than chaotic, impulsive primitives. The datapad chimed again, pulling his attention back to the infuriating directive. The Galactic Academic Council, in its infinite wisdom, had mandated a comparative study of human juveniles to understand their cognitive development. Caerval knew better than to defy the Council's orders, no matter how asinine. Still, the prospect of wasting his time on creatures barely above feral grated on his pride. He activated the communication console, a holographic interface springing to life. "Bring me the profiles of Earth's most promising juveniles," he ordered his assistant, a placid AI named Orin. "As you wish, Professor," Orin replied in its neutral melodic tone. "I shall select candidates based on intelligence, creativity, and emotional range." Caerval waved dismissively. "As long as they can comprehend basic instructions, it will suffice." Moments later, a cluster of holographic profiles materialized before him. The faces of the chosen children stared back at him, bright eyes filled with curiosity, unbridled energy practically radiating from their digital representations. There were 6 in total, hailing from various corners of Earth. Riya Patel, age 10, a prodigy in mathematics with an insatiable curiosity about the unknown. Jason Miller, age 11, a tinkerer who dismantled and rebuilt his first engine at 7. Sophia Nguyen, age 9, a chess champion with an uncanny ability to read people. Malik Anderson, age 12, a natural leader with a penchant for solving complex logistical problems. Elena Rodriguez, age 10, a storyteller whose vivid imagination rivaled entire simulation programs. Noah Kim, age 8, quiet but observant with a talent for seeing connections others missed. "They don't look particularly impressive," Caerval muttered, scrutinizing the profiles. "But they will do." The children were transported aboard the luminal nexus within a week. Caerval expected their first moments to be filled with awe, perhaps even terror, at the grandeur of the station. Instead, they descended from the transport module with wide-eyed curiosity, their chatter punctuated by laughter. "Whoa! Is this floor made of glass?" Jason exclaimed, kneeling to inspect the translucent surface beneath his feet. "Not glass. Some kind of crystal lattice," Sophia corrected, tapping it experimentally. Caerval's antennae twitched. "Children, this is not a playground," he said, his tone sharp. "You will follow instructions precisely, or I shall have you sent back to Earth immediately." 6 pairs of eyes turned to him, their expressions varying from amused to skeptical. Malik crossed his arms. "You always this grumpy?" The room fell silent. Orin's holographic avatar flickered briefly as though stifling a laugh. Caerval bristled. "Grumpy? I am efficient. There is no place for inefficiency in academia." "Sounds grumpy to me," Elena whispered to Noah, who smirked. Caerval decided to ignore the remark. Leading the group into the learning chamber, he gestured at a series of interactive displays lining the walls. "You are here to demonstrate your abilities. Nothing more, nothing less. Begin by solving the puzzles on these interfaces." The children dispersed, their faces lighting up as they examined the tasks. Within minutes, chaos ensued. Riya bypassed the puzzle entirely by hacking into its logic framework. Jason dismantled one of the machines to study its mechanics. Sophia abandoned her station to help Noah, who had been quietly observing the others. Caerval watched in growing disbelief. "What are they doing?" he muttered. "They appear to be collaborating, Professor," Orin offered helpfully. "They're supposed to follow individual instructions. Perhaps," Orin mused, "they have a different understanding of efficiency." Caerval stared, his antennae rigid with frustration. For the first time in his career, he wasn't sure whether he was observing brilliance or absolute chaos. Either way, it was going to be a long assignment. Professor Caerval stood at the edge of the observation deck, his patience thinning with each passing moment. Below, the human children scurried about the interactive learning chamber, defying every expectation he had meticulously set. "Jason Miller, put that terminal back together immediately," Caerval barked, his voice sharp enough to echo against the crystalline walls. Jason looked up from the disassembled control panel, his hands smudged with a metallic residue. "I'm not breaking it, I'm improving it," he said, grinning. "Improving?" Caerval's antennae twitched furiously. "That is a precision-built diagnostic interface, calibrated to perfection. It does not need your improvements?" Jason shrugged. "Yeah, but it's slow. I can fix that." Before Caerval could respond, his attention was diverted by another commotion. On the far side of the room, Ria Patel and Sophia Nguyen were deep in debate, their voices rising. "I'm telling you the puzzle's wrong," Ria argued, jabbing her finger at a holographic projection of an intricate mathematical equation. "It's not wrong, you're just overthinking it," Sophia replied calmly, her arms crossed. Ria groaned, tapping furiously on the console. "No, look, if you account for quantum entanglement, the numbers don't add up. This whole thing is flawed." Sophia tilted her head, a smirk forming. "Or maybe the flaw is in the way you're trying to solve it?" Caerval groaned, pinching the bridge of his narrow nose. These children were turning his state-of-the-art classroom into an unsanctioned experiment in chaos theory. "Oren," he snapped. The AI assistant materialized beside him, its holographic form shimmering. "Yes, Professor?" "Explain to me why this is happening," Caerval demanded, gesturing toward the room where Malik Anderson and Elena Rodriguez had now joined Jason, enthusiastically offering advice on his impromptu engineering project. Oren's tone was infuriatingly calm. The children appeared to be engaging in collaborative problem-solving. Their methods, though unorthodox, suggest an impressive level of adaptability and creativity. Caerval scowled. Unorthodox is a generous term. They're dismantling decades of academic rigor with their antics. As if to punctuate his point, a sudden burst of sparks erupted from Jason's workstation. Malik whooped in excitement. "That was awesome. Do it again?" "I most certainly will not," Caerval bellowed, striding down to the children. He stopped abruptly when Noah Kim approached him, holding a small device that resembled a twisted amalgamation of wires and crystals. "What is this?" Caerval asked, his tone dripping with suspicion. "A stabilizer," Noah said quietly. His voice was soft, but his eyes were sharp with intelligence. "I noticed the energy conduits were fluctuating, so I made this. It should smooth out the power flow." Caerval's gaze flicked to the child, then to the device. "And you deduced this, how?" "I watched the way the lights flickered whenever Jason touched the panel," Noah said as though it were obvious. Caerval stared at the child, momentarily speechless. Before he could formulate a response, Elena called out. "Professor, you might want to see this." She stood near one of the larger holographic displays, pointing at a diagram she had sketched over the puzzle interface. It depicted an entirely new approach to solving the challenge, one that bypassed the original parameters entirely. "I know it's not what you asked for," Elena admitted, "but it works. And it's faster." Caerval leaned in, scrutinizing the diagram. To his dismay and grudging admiration, her solution was not only functional but elegant. "You rewrote the parameters?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Uh-huh," Elena said, grinning. Caerval straightened, his frustration warring with a strange sense of intrigue. "You weren't supposed to rewrite anything. The exercise was meant to test your ability to follow structured instructions. Why follow the instructions when the instructions don't work?" Elena replied with a shrug. For a moment the room fell silent. The children watched Caerval expectantly, their faces a mix of defiance and curiosity. He opened his mouth to retort, but no words came. Instead, he turned sharply on his heel and marched back to the observation deck, Oren trailing behind him. "They're insufferable," Caerval muttered, more to himself than the AI. "Or perhaps," Oren suggested gently, "they are simply different." Caerval sighed, staring out at the stars. "Different indeed. But their difference is disruptive. If they continue like this, I fear they will undermine the very fabric of our academic principles." Oren's hologram flickered thoughtfully. "Or perhaps they will strengthen it, Professor?" Caerval didn't respond. He didn't want to admit it, but deep down, a nagging thought had begun to take root. What if these children were not as primitive as he had believed? Professor Caerval prided himself on his intellect. For decades, his meticulous methodologies and strict adherence to logic had secured his position as one of the galaxy's foremost academics. Yet, as he stared at the chaos unfolding in the learning chamber, he felt his composure fraying. The children were insufferable. But worse than their lack of decorum was their consistent refusal to fail. No matter how convoluted the puzzles or how high the barriers he set, they found solutions that defied every logical framework he had designed. This time he resolved to end their streak of success. Hours later, the children filed into the learning chamber, their faces alight with curiosity. Jason, still smudged from his earlier engineering antics, nudged Malik. Think he's got another unsolvable problem for us? Jason whispered with a grin. Probably, Malik replied. Let's break it anyway. Caraval silenced them with a glare. Today's exercise is unlike anything you've encountered so far. It is not merely a test of intellect but of endurance, adaptability, and focus. This, he gestured to the center of the chamber where a massive holographic construct shimmered to life, is the Tkath Continuum Enigma. The projection was a labyrinth of shifting geometric shapes, layers folding into one another endlessly. It was an ancient and highly regarded mental challenge, renowned for its complexity. The Galactic Academic Council considered it a benchmark of superior cognitive ability, one even most adults struggled to complete. Caraval folded his arms, antennae twitching with satisfaction. You will solve the enigma individually. Collaboration is not permitted, and tampering with the system will result in immediate disqualification. The children exchanged glances. Ria's eyes gleamed with excitement. Sophia tilted her head thoughtfully and Jason frowned, already suspicious. Let us begin, Caraval declared. Each child took a workstation, their holographic interfaces synchronizing with the enigma. The room filled with soft hums as the shapes within the projection began to shift. Ria dove in with precision, her fingers flying over the interface as she calculated algorithms to stabilize the labyrinth's chaotic movements. Sophia observed the patterns, muttering to herself as she tested various approaches. Malik worked methodically, breaking the problem into manageable chunks. But it was Elena who stopped first. She stared at the projection, her brow furrowed. Then slowly she stepped back. This doesn't feel right, she murmured. Caraval noticed her hesitation and approached. Do you wish to forfeit? He asked, his tone more curious than condescending. No, Elena replied, her voice steady. But I think you're tricking us. Tricking you? Caraval echoed. Elena pointed at the projection. This isn't a puzzle you're supposed to solve the way it's presented. It's a distraction, a test of how well we follow orders, not how well we think. Caraval's antennae froze mid-twitch. Before he could respond, Jason chimed in. She's right, he said, his fingers still moving over his interface. I've been poking around the system and there's a second layer underneath the main puzzle. You don't see it unless you stop focusing on the shapes. Wait, what? Ria leaned closer to her interface, her excitement reigniting. How do you find that? By not playing by the rules, Jason said with a grin. Caraval's irritation surged. I explicitly stated tampering was not allowed. Tampering? Jason shrugged. I call it investigating. The other children abandoned their puzzles to gather around Elena and Jason. Within moments they were working together again, their laughter and brainstorming filling the chamber. Stop! Caraval shouted, but they ignored him. Minutes later the enigma's projection froze. The labyrinth's layers peeled away, revealing a hidden core, a single elegant sphere of light. Got it? Sophia declared triumphantly, raising her hand for a high five. Caraval's jaw dropped. Impossible, he muttered. The enigma's core isn't accessible without breaking the rules? Malik supplied, smirking. Caraval glared at him. Without unorthodox methods, yes. Ria stepped forward, her expression both curious and defiant. So, what's the real point of this exercise, Professor? To follow your rules or to solve the problem? Caraval opened his mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. For the first time he had no immediate answer. Back in his quarters later that evening, Caraval reviewed the footage of the session. He watched the children's chaotic yet brilliant teamwork, their refusal to be constrained by his expectations. They solved it, he muttered to himself. Not by my standards, but they solved it. Oren materialized beside him. You seem troubled, Professor. Caraval sighed, his antennae drooping. Trouble doesn't begin to describe it. Their methods are inefficient, chaotic, and entirely against protocol. And yet they succeeded, Oren finished for him. Caraval leaned back in his chair, staring at the stars. For the first time he wondered if there was more to intelligence than logic alone, and if he was the one who had been missing the bigger picture. The luminal nexus hummed quietly as it orbited a distant star, a beacon of Tkath technological superiority. Its pristine halls gleamed under soft bioluminescent lights, and the ambient atmosphere remained a perfect 73 degrees, just as the Tkath preferred. Yet something felt off. Professor Caraval sat in his private study, reviewing the day's reports. The children's unexpected success with the Tkath Continuum Enigma still haunted him. They had dismantled his most carefully constructed exercise with audacious creativity, exposing a vulnerability in his rigid framework of logic. They see solutions where none should exist, he muttered to himself. How is that possible? Before Oren could respond, the lights flickered. Caraval frowned. Oren, run a diagnostic on the power grid. Diagnostics already in progress, Professor, the AI replied, its voice unusually subdued. Preliminary results indicated destabilization of the station's energy core. Caraval stiffened. The Nexus's energy core was a marvel of engineering, capable of harnessing stellar radiation with near-perfect efficiency. Destabilization was virtually impossible. Source of the anomaly? He demanded. There was a brief pause before Oren replied, a subspace fracture. Its signature is consistent with a Class 4 anomaly. Caraval's chest tightened. A Class 4 subspace fracture was a rare but catastrophic phenomenon. Its gravitational disruptions could tear apart even the most advanced structures if left unchecked. How close? Oren's voice was uncharacteristically hesitant. The fracture is within 0.03 parsecs and moving toward the station at increasing velocity. Estimated impact in 6 hours? Caraval shot to his feet. Initiate containment protocols. Redirect auxiliary power to the structural stabilizers. I have already begun, Oren said, but the destabilization is accelerating. Additional intervention will be required. Caraval cursed under his breath and strode toward the learning chamber. If the station was in danger, the children would need to be returned to Earth immediately. Inside the chamber, the children were huddled around a holographic display of the solar system. Jason was attempting to explain orbital mechanics using a mix of hand gestures and exaggerated sound effects, much to the amusement of the others. Jason, planets don't whoosh, Sophia said, rolling her eyes. They move in elliptical orbits. You're oversimplifying. I'm making it fun, Jason retorted, grinning. Their laughter was cut short as Caraval burst into the room. His normally composed demeanor was replaced with visible tension, and his antennae twitched erratically. Children, he began, his voice sharp. We are facing a serious situation. A subspace fracture is approaching the station. We must evacuate you to Earth immediately. Ria raised her hand. What's a subspace fracture? Caraval waved her off impatiently. There is no time for explanations. Follow me. But the children didn't move. Malik stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Wait, how bad is it? What happens if you don't fix it? Caraval hesitated. If it is not contained, the station will be destroyed. The weight of his words settled over the room, but instead of panic, the children exchanged determined glances. Can we help? Noah asked quietly. Caraval blinked, startled. You? Help. This is not a problem that can be solved by tinkering and guessing. But isn't that what we've been doing the whole time? Jason pointed out, a small smirk on his face. Caraval opened his mouth to respond, but Elena interrupted. If this station goes down, we're in trouble too, right? So why not let us try? The professor's antennae twitched in frustration. This is not a game. A subspace fracture requires precise calculations and advanced knowledge. Then teach us, Sophia interrupted, her tone firm. You've been saying how much smarter you are than us this whole time. Prove it. For a moment, Caraval said nothing. The idea was absurd, and trusting children with a crisis of this magnitude went against every protocol and instinct he possessed. But as he looked at their faces, serious, eager, unafraid, he felt a flicker of doubt. Very well, he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. But follow my instructions precisely. There is no room for error. Within minutes, the chamber transformed into a command center. The children were assigned tasks under Caraval's strict supervision. Ria and Sophia worked on recalibrating the station stabilizers, their quick thinking and mathematical prowess keeping pace with the AI's complex algorithms. Malik coordinated efforts between the groups, ensuring everyone stayed focused and efficient. Jason and Noah examined the power conduits, devising a way to reroute energy from non-essential systems to reinforce the containment field. Elena, meanwhile, studied the fracture's patterns, her imagination piecing together a potential solution. Professor, she called, what if we disrupt the subspace frequency? Wouldn't that slow it down? Caraval stared at her, surprised by the suggestion. That might work, he admitted reluctantly. But executing it would require precision. Then let's do it, Elena said. As the hours ticked by, Caraval found himself marveling at the children's focus and ingenuity. Their methods were unconventional, even chaotic, but they worked. By the time the fracture reached critical proximity, the station's containment field was ready. With one final command, the stabilizers activated, dispersing the fracture's energy harmlessly into the surrounding space. The room erupted in cheers, but Caraval remained silent, staring at the readouts. They had succeeded, not because of him but because of them. For the first time in his life, the great Professor Caraval felt humbled. The containment field held, its shimmering barrier of light encasing the luminal nexus like a protective cocoon. The subspace fracture, now safely dispersed, left behind a faint ripple in the fabric of space. For the first time in hours, the station was quiet, save for the soft hum of its systems returning to normal. The children sat on the floor of the learning chamber, exhausted but triumphant. Jason leaned back against the console, wiping his smudged hands on his pants. "We're officially geniuses," he said with a tired grin. Malik smirked. "Speak for yourself. I'm just the guy who keeps you all from losing it." Sophia rolled her eyes. "You're welcome for the math, by the way. You'd still be guessing without me." Caraval stood at the edge of the room, watching them with a mixture of disbelief and reluctant admiration. His antennae twitched as he replayed the events in his mind. The solutions they had devised, though unconventional and, at times, maddeningly chaotic, had worked. They had worked. "Children," he said finally, his voice cutting through their chatter. The group turned to face him, their expressions ranging from expectant to defiant. "What you accomplished today is unprecedented. I must admit, I did not believe you were capable of such a feat." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Is that your way of saying thank you?" Caraval's antennae twitched in irritation. "Do not mistake my words for undue praise. Your methods were reckless, your approach disorderly, and your disregard for protocol unacceptable. Yet we saved your station," Elena interjected, crossing her arms. Caraval hesitated. He was unused to being interrupted, but she was correct. The Nexus still existed because of their resourcefulness. "Yes," he admitted grudgingly. "You did." Later, in his private quarters, Caraval reviewed the data logs from the crisis. The children's unique problem-solving strategies fascinated him. They had approached the fracture not as an insurmountable obstacle but as an evolving challenge, adapting their tactics with each new variable. Their ability to collaborate, combining logic, creativity, and intuition, was unlike anything he had observed in his own species. "Oren," he said, addressing his AI assistant. "Do you have an analysis of the children's performance?" Oren's holographic form materialized beside him. "Indeed, Professor. Their approach was highly irregular but remarkably effective. They leveraged their individual strengths while compensating for each other's weaknesses, a form of collective problem-solving uncommon among Tkath scholars." Caraval leaned back in his chair, his antennae drooping. "It goes against every principle of our academic structure. And yet," he paused, staring at the star-speckled void outside his window. "Perhaps our principles are flawed." Oren tilted its head, a rare gesture of curiosity. "Do you mean to suggest that the Tkath might learn from humanity?" Caraval let out a low chitter, the Tkath equivalent of a rueful laugh. "It would appear so." The following day, Caraval summoned the children to the observation deck. They arrived in their usual fashion, noisy, curious, and utterly unapologetic. Jason immediately gravitated toward a control panel, only to be stopped by a sharp look from Caraval. "Before you touch anything," Caraval began, "there is something I must say." The group fell silent, their expressions shifting from playful to attentive. Caraval clasped his hands behind his back, his posture stiff but deliberate. "I underestimated you. I judged you by the standards of my species, believing that order and logic were the pinnacle of intelligence. You have proven me wrong." The children exchanged surprised glances. Ria broke the silence. "So, you're saying we're smarter than you?" Caraval's antennae twitched, but he managed to suppress his irritation. "I am saying that you possess a form of intelligence that defies conventional metrics. Your creativity, adaptability, and emotional depth are strengths I fail to recognize. For that, I owe you an apology." Malik grinned. "Apology accepted. So what now?" Caraval gestured toward the vast expanse of space visible through the observation deck's transparent walls. "Now, I complete my report to the Galactic Academic Council. I will recommend that humanity's potential, particularly that of its youth, be re-evaluated. You may very well represent the future of intergalactic collaboration." Elena's eyes lit up. "Does that mean more aliens are going to study us?" "Perhaps," Caraval replied, his tone thoughtful. "But if they do, they will come with open minds. And I suspect you will surprise them as well." As the children departed the observation deck, chattering excitedly about their next adventure, Caraval remained behind, staring out at the stars. For the first time in his long career, he felt a spark of something unfamiliar: hope. Perhaps the universe was far larger and far more extraordinary than even he had imagined. The Galactic Academic Council's central chamber was a spectacle of grandeur, a vast arena of crystalline architecture suspended in orbit above the Council's homeworld. Delegates from countless species filled the tiers of seats, their bioluminescent robes and flickering holograms casting prismatic hues across the chamber. At the center stood Professor Caraval, his usually impeccable posture slightly tense. He had delivered countless presentations to the council before, each one cementing his reputation as a leading academic. But this time was different. This time, he carried a revelation that challenged the very foundations of Tkath intellectual superiority. Esteemed council members, Kerval began, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. I come before you to present the findings of my recent study on the cognitive abilities of human juveniles. He gestured, and a holographic projection of the children's activities aboard the luminal nexus filled the chamber. Clips of their ingenuity, teamwork, and unconventional methods played before the silent audience. At first I approached this assignment with disdain, Kerval admitted, his antennae drooping slightly. I considered it a trivial task unworthy of my intellect. But these human children, they defied every expectation. They accomplished what I believed to be impossible, not through adherence to logic or protocol, but through creativity, adaptability, and collaboration. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Kerval continued, during a catastrophic event, a subspace fracture that threatened to destroy the station, these children demonstrated an intelligence that cannot be measured by traditional metrics. They saw solutions where my advanced systems and protocols failed. They succeeded where even I could not. Back aboard the luminal nexus, the children gathered in the learning chamber for what they knew would be their final lesson. The air buzzed with a mixture of excitement and bittersweet anticipation. So, Malik said, leaning back in his chair, what's the verdict? Are we officially space geniuses now? Kerval regarded him with a flicker of amusement. In a manner of speaking, yes. The council has agreed to my recommendations. Humanity's youth will be considered a vital asset in future intergalactic collaborations. Wait, Jason interjected, his eyes wide. Does that mean more aliens are going to want to study us? Like field trips to Earth? Kerval's antennae twitched. It is possible. But the focus will not be on studying you. It will be on learning with you. Sophia grinned. So, we're basically intergalactic diplomats now? In a way, yes, Kerval replied. Though I suspect your methods may prove challenging for other species to adapt to. That's kind of the point, isn't it? Elena said, her tone thoughtful. We don't think like them. That's why it works. Kerval nodded slowly. Indeed. Your capacity for unconventional thinking is a strength I underestimated. It is a lesson I will not forget. As the children prepared to leave, the station's shimmering corridors felt both familiar and strange. Each step carried the weight of their journey, the chaos, the laughter, the impossible victories. At the airlock, Kerval stood with Orin at his side, watching as the transport module awaited the children. I have arranged for your return to Earth, Kerval said. Your families will be informed of your contributions, though the specifics of the incident will remain classified. The Council believes it is in humanity's best interest to keep the details of your involvement discreet for now. Malik offered a mock salute. No problem, Professor. We'll keep it top secret. Elena hesitated before stepping onto the transport module. Are you going to miss us? Kerval's antennae twitched in a rare show of vulnerability. I will miss the unpredictability you bring. It has been a most enlightening experience. Jason grinned. You mean we made you a better alien? Kerval chittered softly, the Tkath equivalent of a laugh. Perhaps you did. As the transport module departed, Kerval remained at the viewport, watching until it vanished into the star-speckled void. You seem conflicted, Professor, Orin observed. Kerval sighed, his antennae drooping slightly. Conflicted, yes, but also hopeful. These children have shown me a perspective I had never considered. A reminder that intelligence is not a singular concept but a spectrum of possibilities. Orin tilted its holographic head. Do you believe the Council will act on your findings? They must, Kerval said firmly. If the galaxy is to thrive, it must embrace diversity, not just of species but of thought. The Tkath have long believed we are the pinnacle of intellectual evolution. We are not. Humanity, in its chaos and creativity, has proven that there is still much to learn. Kerval turned from the viewport, his gaze resolute. For the first time in his long career, he felt the stirrings of something new. A sense of purpose not rooted in superiority but in curiosity. The stars beyond the nexus shimmered with infinite possibilities, and for the first time, Kerval felt ready to explore them, not as a master but as a student.